Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. When you hear the word leader, what comes to mind? Do you think of somebody at the top who's the decider? Do you think of somebody like Humphrey Bogart's character in Mutiny Kane, Captain Queeg, who is a martinet? Well, my experience with leadership, as that wonderful introduction so explained, has always been in groups of teams of size 2, where basically I'm the leader and there's one member of my team. Specifically, in the past 25 years, I have advised approximately 50 or so thesis students at the Naval Postgraduate School. Now, even a team as small as that brings into play many leadership styles and properties. And I'm going to talk about the 3 that I found to be most important when advising master students. The first is to have a clear objective and to be very clear about communicating that objective with your team. The second is to understand and diagnose the strengths and the weaknesses of the team. In this case, to understand what my students' strengths and weaknesses were. And then finally, to know when to push the team and when to just stand back out of the way. Now, I'm going to talk about some of these experiences with different students. One of my first was a student named Max. And he came into my office. He was not one of the stronger students. And he had originally started on a topic that had kind of gone south. And so he was looking for another one. Now, his technical skills were somewhat marginal, again, having had him in class, but he was a very, very hard worker, and he was clearly determined. So his strength was his determination and his willingness to do whatever it took. His main weakness had to do with just his ability to master some of the technical details. So as a result, I met with him much more frequently than I usually do. We met practically every day for at least an hour. And I helped him overcome some of his technical hurdles. And it was a very difficult journey for him, especially. But he finally made it to the finish line and was able to graduate with a thesis. This was actually one of the most rewarding students that I had, because about 10 years later, I was at a conference and I just happened to run into him, and he was thanking me profusely for saving his career, because at the Naval Postgraduate School, if you don't graduate, then that's basically it. One of my next students, a man named John, was at the opposite end. He came in with a very clear idea of what he wanted to do, and he was off the charts technically. I mean, when it came to being in my class, I mean, he could have taught the class. So for somebody like that, my main job as the leader is to basically stay out of his way. So this is the opposite of the Captain Queeg type of thing, which is micromanaging and insisting on everything. So our meetings of once a week, he would come in, he would show me what he did, tell me what he was going to do next. And I would say, great, go and do it. And he was just one of the most rewarding, just because I really didn't have to do anything other than to just say, yeah. Again, opposite end of the spectrum, understand what their needs are, understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. In this case, John didn't have any weaknesses that I could discern. His writing was excellent, his technical skills were outstanding, and he produced one of the most outstanding theses that I've ever advised. And he was a finalist in the Morris Tisdale Prize, which is what the Operations Research Department awards to their finest theses. So again, having a clear objective, understanding strengths and weaknesses, and knowing when to push, as I did with Max, and knowing when to back off and let him go, as I did with John. Now, most of the students fall somewhere in between there, where they need a little bit of pushing and a little bit of standing back. I had a student named Phil who was of that middle category where he had some strengths, and then in our work together, I had to help him acquire some new ones. He came in with a clear idea of what he wanted to do, except that I had to help him acquire some of the technical ability in order to accomplish that. And interestingly, I just got an email from him this morning who was asking me about something that I had talked about during our meetings together. And I was able to refer him to my PhD student from about a decade ago who did some very interesting work on that area. Now, this PhD student, Ali, came in, again, searching for a topic. So I had to help him find the objective. He had middling technical skills. So but he was a very, very hard worker. So I was able to help him acquire the technical skills that he needed to accomplish his thesis and his dissertation, actually. He was a PhD student. And I was able to refer his work to my former student, Phil, who I just got an email from this morning, as I said. So the most challenging thing in many of these is the advent of the project, where you need to understand where you're going and you need to understand where you are and how to get there. So my leadership style is to evaluate all of that, evaluate the goals, evaluate the team and our ability to reach those goals, and to help them meet those goals in manageable steps. As they say, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So step by step, I was able to help more than 50 thesis students achieve their goals, graduate, and move on to the next step of their careers. So again, this leadership style, I think, would apply to larger teams. I just haven't done it. Have a clear objective, understand the strengths and weaknesses of your team, and know when to push, micromanage, and when to back off. Mr. Toastmaster.